Okay, preparing to live stream the webinar. And we are live.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the May 16th, 2023 edition of the Washington County Committee for Citizen Involvement. My name is Bruce Bartlett, and I seem to be the chair of this organization. We have a full schedule tonight. As the first order of business, I'd like to get the minutes from the last meeting approved. Anybody have any comments that are not already turned in? Jim?
Yeah, I just looked at them again today, and my name's been left off the attendance roster the last 2 months. So the CPO4M chair hasn't been on the roster the last couple of months. That should be added. And then there's a number of other changes. I don't know if you want me to go through them all now, but there's typos. There's a number of things that, as a group, I think that we should, we should have it should represent what we're doing better. I mean, there's some sentences in there that say that I said something and it doesn't make any sense. So,
okay, so Mary, why don't you take it from here? You got something to say about this.
I do have something to say, and I apologize. My camera doesn't seem to be working, and I don't know how to figure it out. But I had submitted abbreviated minutes that were included with the notice that went out, not today, but the first notice that went out. And Bruce, do you have the ability to share those? I added in the names of the people that I was aware that were attending that had been left off. But if you go back to Robert's Rules of Order, they talk about opinions not being appropriate in minutes, and that really the only thing you need to include is motions, who made the motions and who seconded the motions, and the vote of the motion and what the motion is. It suggests that possibly you can do a summary of what the speakers had to say. But one of the things I think we need to do is, when we have committee reports, I feel that to be sure we capture everything that's said, the committee should actually submit something in writing, and that written document then can be part of the incorporated within the minutes. It means that committee chairs are going to have a little bit more work to do. Potentially you could just submit your minutes from your meeting or your meeting summary to save yourself from having to redo some work that you've already done. But this is the version that I worked up.
I think I'm sharing my screen.
You are, I see it.
Okay. And so this is the proposed format for the meeting minutes. And it would be less likely to require lots of little editing. It captures the gist of what's going on and the votes. And since Virginia is doing a bang-up job getting this recorded, the entire meeting with what was actually said is readily available. So we have the attendees list. Looks like we got Jim and Warren there for 4M. And then our guest speakers, county staff, other attendees, are highly involved guests. And then it goes through the agenda, calling out what's there. A few touch points on the speakers, our featured speakers presentation. High level of the subcommittee reports. A little bit of a roundtable, and the adjournment. I like this because we spend a lot of time trying to get the meeting minutes accurate, and it is not a useful thing to do in a meeting. So I would like to have some discussion about the proposed format, new format for the CCI.
Does that have the YouTube link?
If it doesn't, it should.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do we actually have a YouTube link that we can use at this point? I thought we didn't have access to the CCI YouTube.
Oh, no,
panel.
it doesn't matter where it's at, but there's a link that takes you to the video. and-
Okay.
You know, we can sort things out at some point, but right now you can always, the meeting is being recorded on YouTube and I can provide a link, even if
So
it's
does-
not on the right account.
Does that
Okay.
link change every meeting?
Yes,
So you would have to submit that and get it in the minutes.
yep. I
Okay.
could give it to Bruce and make him do the work.
Yeah, that's fine. That's why I get paid so much. Gretchen.
That's right.
Getting back to the subject, I
What's that on
found
the
the
subject?
comments regarding Catherine's absolutely useless, totally useless.
You mean in the minutes?
Yes, that would, I mean, it has nothing, quite frankly, that would allow someone to really understand what was discussed at all.
Well,
That's what
about
the
if you-
YouTube recording is for.
But that's not the point of minutes, Mary. I respectfully disagree. I understand your perspective. I personally, Jim Long needs to get his damn minutes in, his stuff in before the meeting, because most of the time that's the problem with the discussion about the minutes. But we need to have much more in-depth minutes than this, because if somebody comes and wants to look at this a year from now, they're going to want to have some idea what was going on and not have to go and find a YouTube video to find anything out. I mean, it's just not realistic for most people. So I'll shut up.
Well, okay, Fran, what do you got? Ooh. Analysts, hold on here. Now let's just say what we got. So Paul Johnson is still in the participants and needs to be advanced to the panelist. And Fran is also in the panelists. It needs to be advanced to it, or is in the attendees. Needs to be advanced. Okay, did any of those people want to comment on the state of the minutes? Okay, I guess not. Any other, so let me hear some more discussion about the proposed minute format.
I don't think I ever received them. I've been looking everywhere in my email.
What's that? The minutes?
Yeah,
Mary?
I don't believe they came in through email. If you go back to the notice that you received from community engagement about the meeting, there was a link there to these. And I feel like for people to really have a good understanding of what was discussed, they do need to go back to the YouTube. And I think it's technology we need to embrace. And, you know, for those that are used to being able to go back to minutes to get the gist of the conversation, it's time to wake up, to learn to use the new tools that are available.
Okay, I tend to agree. Christina, Fran, and Ben Marcotte are in the attendees and should be promoted to.
I'm unable to promote them. Virginia's still the host and
well, I
hasn't
said you
returned
can
it,
I
so
can do
she'll
it,
have to.
but
I got it. I got it.
you could
I
you
got
can
it.
make me a
I can
member.
do it.
Lyle.
I got it.
Yeah. Okay, good.
I think I did have it.
I'm
So we're
here.
both
I'm here.
doing it.
I'm here. I'm here. Okay.
There we go.
Okay. I think I
Excellent.
might have a reasonable solution to this. I really believe that I really like this format, by the by, Bruce, for the summary, because we do such in-depth stuff. But I think what might really help is if there were transcripts. In other words, if we could create the transcript with this and put the transcript in something that maybe a little more user-friendly, separate from the YouTube video, because then people can go line by line what people said, and it's a exact replica of what was said to augment this summary. And that is what I would propose, is have the YouTube video and have a transcript and this. Boom. And that makes it all automated, much simpler. So
Is anybody familiar with getting transcripts of YouTube videos? Or where would the transcript come from?
Let me, if you're willing to let me look, take the action item to go look this up and figure out how it works with YouTube and or this recording mechanism, then I will do so. There is lots of software out there that just will take the recording and make a transcript also. But I think that would help alleviate this entire dilemma.
Okay. Anybody?
I have a comment.
Yes.
Zoom has the ability to convert things into a written transcript. But I believe you have to capture that as the meeting is ending, but I'm not sure.
Okay, well, Fran has the action item to come back at the next meeting and inform us about transcripts.
I support that idea.
Very good. Okay, and so now anybody opposed to approving the minutes? Boom, 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 boom. I don't see anybody taking that, so we have one.
Well, I'd like to see them improved. I mean, there's corrections that need to be made.
Okay, well then offline you go to them and make those.
And send them to who?
Christina, and copy to Christina and I guess everybody. Or Christina, when you receive the updated minutes from April, could you send them to the group?
Yes. Are you proposing that they be accepted via email?
I would propose that we could wait until next month to approve things. Yeah, why don't we do that? Why don't we wait until next month to approve the April minutes pending Jim's edits? Virginia.
Yeah, I am volunteering to take the reins of the communications committee. Ellen has been missing an action for a while.
I have, you're jumping the gun a little bit.
Well, I haven't seen the agenda.
Well,
okay, no problem.
The agenda's there. So any more minute discussion? Okay, let's hold off on the elections. We have Aaron Wardell from the long range planning here to talk about the work program. And I'd like to give her the floor to get on with her presentation. So Aaron, take the floor.
Thanks, Bruce. My name is Erin Wardell. I'm the Planning and Development Services Manager for Washington County, and I'm here tonight to share with you our planning work program for 23-25. So I do have a PowerPoint that I'm going to be bringing up. Is that displaying?
Yep.
Great. Feel free to jump in with questions as I'm talking. I don't mind at all if you interrupt me. So just give a shout out if you have a question as we're talking. So overview of the presentation is overview of the work that we do in the planning department, our work program context and the organization of how we prepared it, our priorities for the next 2 years. We'll have a summary of the requests we've received from the community of topics we can work on or can choose to work on, and then our next steps. So starting off with an overview of planning at Washington County, we have 3 different planning teams. Our community planning team maintains and updates the land use components of the county's comprehensive plan. The transportation planning team maintains and updates the transportation elements of the county's comprehensive plan. And then our current planning or development review team reviews development proposals to ensure that they meet the applicable county comprehensive plan and state requirements, and they provide general development assistance to the community. So these 3 planning teams work together to implement, maintain, and update the county comprehensive plan. Most of the projects that the community planning and transportation planning team work on eventually end up adopted into one of our plans, and then they're implemented by our development review team. An overview for the work program. The purpose of the work program is to identify and prioritize planning staff activities in support of our highest priority needs and the board's policy guidance. We simply can't work on everything. And so this is a really important tool for us to know what we're supposed to be focusing our energies on. We do include in our work program mandatory work, so mandatory tasks that we have to do because of mandates. We include ordinances that will be passed through the Planning Commission and the Board of Commissioners. Issue papers, which are items that we are still doing research on, and we don't know yet if it will turn into an ordinance or a larger project. We have studies, and then we have special projects, which are oftentimes funded by grants. The work program attempts to balance our available staff and budget, our ongoing routine non-discretionary tasks, things that we just have to do as a planning department in the state of Oregon. We have a number of regulatory requirements that we have to meet. We also are balancing prior input and guidance from the board, including their budget priorities. And then we're including community input and requests. There's a lot of different things going on in the work program. So there are some new things with the work program this year. The first is that this is now a biennial work program rather than annual, and that better reflects the amount of time most of these planning efforts take. Doing a 2-year work program will allow us to more efficiently allocate our staff resources and also manage our time. We are implementing an equity framework for all of our proposed planning projects. This is building off of an equity framework that we developed for a couple of projects in the last couple of years. We're also including all 3 of our planning teams in the work program. Previously, we only included community planning and transportation planning, which are sometimes referred to as long-range planning. Now we're including current planning, again, to better reflect all of the planning work we do at the county and how we're all tied together. We've also organized the work program this year around themes to better communicate our policy direction and goals to our community. We have an online open house available right now. This is the first time we've done an online open house for the work program, and that's available. We can share the link out for that if people haven't seen it. It's a way for us to collect input from general members of the community, and it is in both English and Spanish. Mary, I see your hand. Go ahead.
So my question is have the online open houses completely replaced the traditional open houses? And will we see a return of the traditional open houses sometime in the near future?
We are doing some traditional in-person, I think you mean, open houses for projects. And so we're actually doing quite a bit of in-person engagement these days. So no, online open houses haven't completely replaced doing in-person engagement. I see them as a supplement. It's a different way to collect information, but we like to be in person as much as possible too.
Perfect, thank you.
Fran, go ahead.
Just a quick question about this. We know that especially our rural communities have a real problem with broadband, et cetera. Does LUT have any kind of a calibration as to what percentage of the Washington County community in total is actually able to participate in the online open houses, and how many people are being excluded? And is there a way of doing something specific for the rural areas that don't have this access?
You know, that is a really good question, and I'm taking a second to write that down. I don't know the answer off the top of my head. I think that, so I know that our Economic Development Department is doing some work around broadband access within Washington County, and so that's something I can check in with them about and see if they have some statistics on accessibility with that. It is something we're sensitive to, though. We know that we're not able to get feedback from anyone or from everyone in any one particular way. That's why we try to engage with people in a number of different ways for all of our projects. So if people don't have the ability to engage with us through the online tools, we still accept comments through written form as well. I just received a mailed in comment on the work program today. And so that is still a way that people can communicate with us, for example. We're not doing an in-person open house around the planning work program. I think it would be challenging to make it of interest to enough people who would actually come into an open house like that. And also it's a big county. And so we probably have to do a number of them in a number of different places. But for other projects, we are doing more of the in-person engagement just to make sure that we're able to get to people in a number of different ways. So the last point on this slide is that we have 2 tiers of project priorities. I know many of you have been involved in this process for a number of years, and you've seen the previous work programs had 3 tiers. We kept items on the 3rd tier to reflect that they were items the county staff would like to get to, but likely wouldn't have capacity to do that. Quite frankly, we weren't getting to everything in tier 2. And so it didn't make sense to me to put in the 3rd tier if we're not actually getting to everything in tier 2. So we've organized it that tier 1 are the priority items that we will certainly be working on. We may be able to work on the tier 2 items as time goes on if staff capacity and budget becomes available. Go ahead, Mary.
Gretchen actually has a question. She can't use the online raise the hand.
Okay, and go ahead.
I have some physical disabilities with my hands. My question is, I understand the general not having in-person comment programs for the work plan. However, I still think it might be useful to have one in Hillsborough, that people from those of us who are interested in land uses could come and have direct input, because for people like me, it's really hard to attend an online program. So if I could make that suggestion, have one.
I'm
Thank
writing
you.
down the suggestion. I'm not sure we can pull it off for this year, but it's something we could consider next time. Probably we're on pretty limited time at this point to be able to organize and notice and let people know that's something that's happening. But I will take that comment and write it down. Okay, I'm gonna move on to the next slide. So we wanted to do a little bit of a review of some of the tasks that we completed in the previous 2 cycles. And so this slide is reflecting work that was conducted in 21-22 and 22-23. So the first of those I referenced before, that was to develop an equity framework, equity index, and model community engagement plan through our Major Street Transportation Improvement Program, funding allocation, and our middle housing projects, which were implementation of HB 2001. Go ahead, Mary.
So questions about the model community engagement plan. Is that something that CCI at some point is going to have an opportunity to review and learn more about?
We can certainly share that with you. Yeah, that's not a problem at all.
So is it
it's intended to be a model. And so what we will do with that is, in fact, you've probably seen a very recent one where we've developed the community engagement plan for the significant natural resources work using that as a guide. So the intent is that it's essentially a template, and then you'll fill it in unique to each project and the needs of that particular project.
So I think access to the template would be really useful to some of us that are interested in the process.
And I think the equity framework and index sort of as a pair would be nice to learn about.
Certainly. We actually just had this request from a planning commissioner as well. And so we can work on bundling all of those pieces together and sharing them out. I think it's really interesting work, so I'm really excited to share it. And we could even come back at a future meeting and talk through it if that would be of use to you.
That would be.
Okay, great. So HB 2001 and Senate Bill 458 kept us really busy over this time period. So this is implementation of the middle housing legislation that came down from the state. So we had 3 separate ordinances and a tremendous amount of work that went into those ordinances to implement that into our comprehensive plan documents. We also updated our transportation system plan, implementing outcomes from a number of different studies, including the Tualatin Valley Trail Concept Plan, the Urban Reserves Transportation Study, Cooper Mountain Transportation Study, and the Tonkin Area Employment Plan. And so some of these were bundled into ordinance number 881. There were a few other transportation ordinances as well that we could talk about more, but aren't reflected here. Then there's the Urban Planning Area Agreement with the City of Tigard, ordinance number 879. We enter into urban planning area agreements with the cities when there is an area in urban reserve that a city may plan for, as well as to consider future planning jurisdiction for the unincorporated urban areas. So it's a lot of coordination with the cities to decide on our agreements for what those can look like. And then we are essentially giving planning authority to the cities so that they can plan for their future areas and eventually annex them. Bruce, go ahead. Bruce, did you have a question?
I will unmute.
It helps.
That old trick. So if the county is going to, I mean, the county is not doing a lot of development planning at this point, but if the county does some kind of urban planning for the unincorporated area, is it almost by definition inside the urban planning area of a city?
Not necessarily, it depends on the area. So these get really complicated. And there's, depending on the city and the urban planning area agreement we've entered into with them, there can be different language around how we conduct planning. So for example, several years ago, I was the project manager for the Aloha Tomorrow project, which many of you are familiar with. So the county conducted planning for the Aloha Town Center area, which is unincorporated. That area is referenced in, I believe, both Beaverton's and Hillsborough's urban planning area agreements. And so it's something that the county was able to go forward and do the planning for, assuming it's going to stay unincorporated for a while. We were authorized by the board to do that work at that time. But we did coordinate with the cities as we were going through it. So when we do planning for areas that we expect will go into a particular city, we talk to that city. One of the areas, I believe you'll see this in a future slide, we know that we will need to do some future planning for the Raleigh Hills Town Center area, the intersection of Beaverton, Hillsdale, Olson Shoals area. That is expected to be future Beaverton. So while the county may take the lead on some of the planning for that area, we will coordinate extensively with the city of Beaverton, expecting that it will eventually be theirs.
That is complicated. Okay, thank you.
It is really complicated, yes. And that's an example of some of the typical work that we do at the county. It's a lot of coordination with our city partners. So then the final bullet point on this slide is application of the future development 20-acre plan designation to areas brought into the regional urban growth boundary in 2018. So this is another really complicated thing. Portland Metro makes urban growth boundary expansion decisions for the metro area. So when the urban growth boundary expands in Washington County for the area within Metro, it's done by Metro, not the county. We then have to apply this FD20 plan designation to those areas, essentially acknowledging that they are no longer rural, they are expected to become urban and they will go into a city. So it's sort of a holding zone, and we are required to apply that to land once it comes into the urban growth boundary. We'll be doing that ordinance again for a couple of other areas, probably later this year, because we have some new urban growth boundary expansions. We do something similar when North Plains or Banks or Gaston amend their urban growth boundary, but it's different because it's not metro rules. So this slide talks a little bit more about our priorities and our themes. So as I said earlier, the tasks are organized into 2 tiers. Tier 1 is the highest priority. These are things that we are certain we will work on in the next 2 years. Tier 2 are things that we have identified insufficient staff resources or lack of funding, but work can be initiated if those resources become available. So let's say we finish up some of the projects in Tier 1, we now have staff capacity, we can start moving into the Tier 1 tasks. Our proposed themes for fiscal year 23-25 communicate our alignment with the board's priorities and describe our work to the community. So those themes are housing, natural resources and climate, multimodal transportation system planning and funding, and then plan and code updates. So as I said previously, a lot of the work that we do is non-discretionary. That means it is just required by state and local policies. So and this includes work that we do for development review. This is primarily what our development review current planning team does. We also do plan amendments. We process those as they're requested. We do transportation modeling, which is required. We do GIS mapping. We administer the transportation development tax policies for the county. And so we work with the cities in order to implement that. We also have to manage the statewide transit improvement fund funds that come to the county. So there's more than that, but that's sort of a high level view of some of the main activities that we do that are non-discretionary. We also participate in planning efforts for local, regional, state, and federal planning efforts. Some examples of this: city planning for new urban areas. I just referenced that in talking about the FD20 application. We've spent a lot of time over the last 2 years working with Metro on the regional transportation plan. We've also been doing planning for some major transportation projects in our region, such as working on TV Highway. It's a project I've been involved in for many, many years. Gretchen, does your hand go up? Go ahead. Oh, I can't hear you. Can you unmute?
Sorry.
That's okay.
I'm curious, having been a former city councilor, I was really always interested in what was going on with the MSTIP planning process. How much of that do you get involved in it wearing your transportation hat?
That falls into the transportation funding realm. And so the transportation planning team has been involved in the funding allocation step of MSTIP, essentially. And so we help determine the priorities for the funding and which projects will be funded at which time, or rather we prepare the recommendations on that. And then the board, of course, makes the final decision. So that's typically been the planning responsibility for the projects. We're also usually involved in cooperation with our capital projects team and project design. And so we have some transportation planning staff right now who are participating in the early stages of design for projects that are in that phase. And primarily our role in that is making sure that the designs meet our planning intent, that they match up with other planning efforts we've done in the community, that we're serving the multimodal needs of the community and things like that. So that's been our involvement there. Thanks. And the specific projects list may change over time, but a lot of this work continues through this coordination that we have to do and new projects that arrive on our plates. So moving into our themes, of course, one of the biggest efforts is around housing. This is a tremendous amount of the work that we'll be doing the next couple of years and have been doing for the last several years. So the first on this list is housing production and affordability policies. We'll be collaborating with the county's Department of Housing Services and our Office of Community Development to work on county regulations to encourage development of a greater variety of housing types, enhancing affordability, and addressing housing-related legislative changes made in this legislative session and the last legislative session. So we did have some housing legislation come down this year, and so we'll be addressing that through ordinances once we have a better understanding of what those look like and what we need to implement. So I saw Mary's hand go up first and then Bruce's.
So Erin, I noticed that the short-term rental issue is not going to probably have time to be addressed in this upcoming period. And I wonder how much impact short-term rentals have on housing supply and affordability, and why that isn't being considered as part of the housing issue.
I know that a number of jurisdictions have done some analysis of the impact on housing availability. It's not something that we've, I think, done any analysis on. I can talk a little bit more about the short-term rentals recommendation and why we didn't recommend it for inclusion this year. I was going to talk about that a little bit later, but we can talk about it now since you already brought it up. We did do some preliminary work on setting up what a short-term rental regulatory program could look like. We looked at other jurisdictions, we developed some draft policies, and we had things packaged up and ready to go. The problem with it was that actually standing up the program was pretty expensive. It was, I think, $150,000 of just startup costs to get the program running, have dedicated staff working on it until we could even start to collect any revenue. And then the financial analysis showed that revenue we may collect from that program may not cover the entirety of staff time. And so given county's current budget constraints, the decision was made that it just wasn't a program we could stand up at this time. But it doesn't mean that that work or some of that analysis can't come back and be looked at in some other ways. So I think that what you're asking about with, is there an impact on the number of short-term rentals and housing availability? That is something we could look into with some of our other housing research. My suspicion is that it's probably not a huge impact in Washington County. I think if we were in a resort community, that could be a different answer there. But that is something we could do some more research on at some point.
And I think 2 points there. I mean, you look at Habitat for Humanity, and they're building, one house at a time, truly a drop in the bucket. But if many drops make a difference over time. And so I think that's something that really does need to be looked at in terms of affordability as well as supply. And affordability really does if you're a first-time home buyer trying to buy and you're having to bid against somebody who's looking to start a short-term rental, I think that truly is an issue. The other question that I have, we keep hearing from the board so much about, that's a service that is provided by a city. That's an urban service that the county should not be providing. And so I guess the question there is, are short-term rentals more of an urban service that should only be provided by cities? Just a question to throw out. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm not sure the answer to that. I do think that was something that the board may have expressed at one of the meetings, is that it seemed like something that a city would do, not the county. And another data point that I think the board was very interested in was that none of the cities within Washington County run a regulatory program right now. So it seemed like something that the county was maybe getting out ahead of before the cities were doing it. And I think that was another piece of information that guided the board in making that decision. So it certainly is complicated, though. Bruce, go ahead.
Yes, but my question is fairly straightforward. In the housing types, is there any consideration made for housing for senior citizens with mobility, like single-story houses? I mean, since we're going to multiple stories, we're going up, not out. Is the Department of Aging and Veteran Services at all involved in helping specify housing types for elderly people?
So that is a consideration when we talk about a variety of housing types. We know that sometimes we've seen in the research that one-level houses can actually have a price premium because people are really looking for something that's more accessible. I think I've seen that happening in my own neighborhood, even when houses go up for sale. It's like, this one-level house is more expensive than the two-level house right down the street. But there is a premium for that because people really want that accessibility. So that is something that is taken into consideration when we think about the variety of housing types that we need to be able to provide for the community, or just housing that provides that accessibility in general, regardless of what it looks like. We do work with the DABS department at the county on a number of different projects, and so they certainly could be added here as well to a group that we'll be coordinating with on housing.
Thank you.
So the next item on here is an audit of our community development code. If you have seen Washington County's community development code, and I expect most of you, if not all of you, have, it is a very large document. It's probably this big. We were going to bring it as a visual aid for the first board briefing on this so that they understood this. Our community development code was largely developed in the 80s. It's been added to since then. It is complicated. It's really hard to read. It's hard for staff to learn. It's hard for the community to learn. And so this is an opportunity for us to do an assessment of our community development code, identify opportunities to simplify and streamline it, really with the goals of reducing barriers and enhancing usability. And I think there's a lot of benefits here to both the community and to staff in making that document more straightforward. But this is a pretty big undertaking. So the first step would just be to do the initial assessment of it. Mary, go ahead.
So Is there a possibility that the current code will just be thrown out and that form-based code might be a consideration? Or is that one of the things that may come out in the audit?
I think that's probably something that would come out in the audit. I think it's unlikely we would throw away the whole development code. I think it's more likely we would go through it and determine what we should keep and what we can simplify. But I don't know yet. We haven't done the audit. And so we'll get some, I'm sure, interesting information from there, and then we'll make that decision down the road.
But isn't that one of the beauties of form-based code, is that it is a much simpler way of making decisions?
There's a number of different catchy terms for types of zoning that you can do essentially. So you can have a form-based code, you can have things like performance-based coding, you can have lean code. There's a lot of different branding for what we could do with the code. I like some of those ideas. I think some of them could be really great, but that doesn't mean we would necessarily not have other parts of our community development code. There's a number of elements, a number of chapters that address different things. And so even if we were to move towards a form-based code, that would probably only replace Article 3 in the Community Development Code. I'm not sure that it would have much impact on the rest of it. But again, I don't know because we haven't done that assessment yet. So certainly something to look at.
Great, thank you.
Yep. Jim, go ahead. Oh, I think you're muted still.
Will the auditor be involved in this audit of community development codes? Obviously,
It is not a financial audit, no. And that word was confusing to somebody else too. It's an assessment. And so really what we're doing is making sure that our code, or looking at our code to determine where it works and where it doesn't work.
What do you mean where it works and where it doesn't work? I mean, there's been some violations of the code. Are you going to be looking at where violations have occurred in the past?
No, it's not about violations. So the code is a comprehensive plan document. And so it's an opportunity to look at that document and determine what about it is complicated, what about it is easy to understand, is it functional, is it keeping up with what we know now about planning that we didn't know in the 80s when that code was put together, what are other jurisdictions doing that we could learn from. So it's really a learning opportunity and an assessment. Gretchen? Oh, I think you're muted.
Doggone it. I have a logistics question. I know this audit is going to be happening. Do we have a hard timeline at which point they have to have finished gathering your information? And then subsequently, do we have a hard timeline for when they will have to have their report completed to present to the board? Because it's been my experience that sometimes these wonderful projects take forever to get done.
Yes, projects can take a long time. So we don't know for sure yet that this is happening. The board will consider and adopt the work program at their July 18th meeting. So once they do that, we'll know for sure what is on the work program for the next couple of years. If this is a go, and I think that it will be, then what we would do is do a scoping exercise for the work. What do we hope to accomplish with it? We would then have to hire an outside consultant in order to do much of the work, because that's what we would need in order to do this work, essentially. So at that time, we would have a clearly defined scope, schedule, budget, all of those pieces put together. And that is something that we can share in the future when we have it ready.
And would that be information that would be presented in a public forum very soon thereafter?
We'll be able to share it, yes. So we'll likely share it with the Planning Commission, likely share it with the board, and we can come and share it with your group as well, or with any other groups. So I think it will be of interest when it is scoped, and so we'll be prepared to talk about that. And then the third on this slide is an issue paper on rural housing options. While we expect to meet most of our housing needs in the urban area, we do have housing in our rural area, and there are some unique legislation pieces that apply in the rural area to consider. There's some unique state statutes around housing in the rural area, and it's something that we've been hearing about quite a bit. And so we'd like to start with an issue paper on some rural housing options and then determine some next steps there. Mary?
So would ADUs in the rural area be eligible as short-term rentals? Or is that something to be determined?
So that is something that would have to be determined. And the ADUs and rural housing options, all of that will be rolled together. And so that's something that we would be taking a look at.
So state law doesn't legislate that ADUs in the rural area can be vacation rentals or short-term rentals.
I do not believe that the state prohibits rural short-term rentals. And there are some communities that allow accessory dwelling units. So I'd have to look into that specifically because I'm not sure off the top of my head what all the regulations are around rural accessory dwelling units and vacation rentals. It's like a nexus of different things I'm just not quite
Yeah.
sure about.
Yeah, no, I appreciate your not trying to snow me with information that you don't know about.
No,
I appreciate that.
Yes, I am writing down that note though, and we can follow up.
Okay, thank you.
So we'll move on to the next slide. Natural resources and climate change. So I know many of you are engaged right now in our significant natural resources limited goal 5 program update. So we will be working through our typical ordinance process, going through our planning commission and the community, including many of you, to prepare Be Engrossed Ordinance number 869. And this is in response to Land Use Board of Appeals remand of Engrossed Ordinance A69 and our habitat assessment guidelines. This is a huge amount of work. And so this is something that's going to be keeping our community planning team very busy over the next year and a half as they work on updating those regulations. And I know many of you are very involved in this work and probably know more about it than I do. The next piece of work that we'll be doing in this topic area is the Climate Friendly and Equitable Communities, or CFEC, as we call it, implementation. CFEC is a set of state transportation and land use planning rules that were adopted in 2022. They require most local governments in Oregon to make really significant changes to their planning regulations and processes. It is a huge amount of information, and we're still working on digesting what it means for Washington County and what it means for our comprehensive plan documents. We know right now that our community development code is already out of compliance with the CFEC requirements, and so we are implementing the state rules directly. That relates to parking minimums required on certain development types and in locations close to transit. We have asked for an extension from the state, or I should say we will be asking because we need to submit the letter still. We will be asking for an extension and implementation of the next phase of parking requirements from the state because our ordinance process takes a really long time to get through and we are very limited in staffing. Many jurisdictions have requested a delay in that time frame, and so we'll be joining them and requesting that in the next couple of weeks. Bruce, go ahead.
I am wondering all the time, actually, if the elimination of parking minimums has been demonstrated to have any impact on people driving cars, since that seems to be the reason that we're doing it. And it certainly has a negative effect on communities, not being able to go someplace and park. Mm-hmm. So is there any demonstration that not having any parking places does anything other than make life miserable for visitors?
I'm not sure. And I'll be honest, this is really hard for me to talk about because I was involved in the rulemaking advisory committee with the state, and I think that they adopted a lot of really complicated rules that aren't going to make our communities better places to live. So but it is what it is, and the state has passed down these rules and we are now required to implement them. I think there could be some good outcomes of these rules, but largely I'm not sure it's going to have that intent. Now, there are some academic papers out there about parking requirements. I'm not sure that the parking requirements impact people's transportation choices as much, or if they can show that in a data-centric way. But I think that it does make development easier in some cases, right? So that's primarily the positive of it, is you don't have to set aside space for 20 parking spaces, something like that. And so there could be some good outcomes, particularly in areas where maybe we have it a commercial plan designation, but there's a lot of really small parcels and they just don't pencil for a development. So that could work, and so we may see some positive there. But in a lot of ways, I think this is just make work for local jurisdictions.
I appreciate your candid observations. Thank you.
Yeah, and I don't want to get in trouble for saying that, but this is
No,
going to be
I
a lot
mean-
of work for us to implement, and we don't have any choice about it.
Okay, well, there you go. Thank you.
Yep, don't get me in trouble. I think most of you know I'm probably always going to tell you what I really think about things.
That's why we invite you.
So next slide, multimodal transportation planning. We will be scoping a major update of our transportation system plan. I made reference to some updates we've done in the last number of years, but we haven't done a major update of our transportation system plan in about 10 years. So it's time. So we would like to start this similar to the code assessment. We'd like to start this by doing an assessment of what we need to update, looking at new requirements since 10 years ago, like the CFAC requirements that is going to influence how we do our transportation system plan. There's some other state rules that have changed, so we'll be responsive to those as well. Oh, go ahead, Gretchen. I see your hand up. Oh, don't forget to unmute.
In my next life, I will never make the mistake again. With this update in mind, I know that the county has traditionally had a long-term transportation planning citizen committee. Will that involve getting the next round of the long-term transportation planning committee? I've served on 2 of those and would love to serve again.
Yes, there will be committees, and so that'll be a big part of setting up our transportation system plan. Update is going to be thinking about our engagement structure, what committee we need to set up, who needs to be on that committee, all of that work that we've done before. So many committee opportunities for people in the future. We have another project that's been going on for a while. That's our Complete Streets Design Update. This was a project that was put on pause primarily due to COVID staffing limitations that we had and so much other work with state mandates coming through. So we did all the background work on our Complete Streets Design Update, which updated our road design and construction standards. So basically saying what a basic road in Washington County needs to look like. How wide should the bike lanes be? How wide should the sidewalks be? How do we accommodate our multimodal users? And what are some different options for how to design that? So we have the background work done, but our engineering team ended up really short-staffed, and they're the ones who need to finish the actual design standards. So we're a little bit on hold on this, but we're expecting that we'll be able to get something adopted over the next 2 years. And so that's why it's here in tier 1. It also will likely roll into the major TSP update as well. Or we could do an interim adoption of some TSP standards around the complete streets that then would get rolled into the major update. Go ahead, Mary.
So when are we going to talk about an update to Resolution Order 8695? Is that rolled into?
That is actually rolled
One-
into the Complete Streets Design Update as well, and unfortunately heavily impacted by the CFAC rules. And so that's something that we need to take another look at now that we have the CFAC rules, make sure it's still consistent with that, and then pass that update through. So the idea was that the road design and construction standards, the updates to TSP policy, and RNO 8695 would all go together.
So CFAC?
That's the climate friendly and equitable communities work.
Okay. So that has implications to road standards?
Transportation development review, yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
I love the nesting layers of rules you have to follow.
Yeah, gosh, Steve Kelly, if he was here, he knows these numbers off the top of his head, but the state transportation planning rule, I think, used to be 14 sections, and now it's 44 sections. So that's what we're trying to unravel. Gretchen, go ahead. I saw your hand up again.
We have a lot of county roads, which are either in cities or abut cities. I'm thinking of some here in King City. And would a review of the rules of how we're going to do the engagement with the cities be part of this complete streets design update? Because
how we design,
and it's, there's going to have to be coordination with the local jurisdiction, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, so the road design and construction standards is a document we have to have because we have to know how we're going to build county roads. when a county road is within a city, we generally work really closely with our city partners on what that road is going to look like when it's going through a construction project or a redesign project. So since you mentioned King City, for example, Beef Bend Road, we have had many, many conversations over the last number of years with Tigard and King City about what is Beef Bend going to look like in the future when it grows up? How do we need to accommodate your future growth areas? And how can we work in partnership to do that? So that's a pretty typical example of how we work with the cities. And that's why you see the county roads adjacent to different cities kind of look different sometimes when they're going through current projects, because we came to a different conclusion through coordination with the city. So Tualatin Sherwood Road and Tualatin actually looks different than Roy Rogers Road on the other side of 99 through Sherwood, which is under construction right now. And the designs that I've seen for what Beef Bend could look like look a little bit different from that too. So it's all
Well, I was
bespoke.
thinking just a specific idea. King City on one side of the street and the county on the other side of the street, and it's county road. And yeah, that seems like an issue fit to cause problems.
Yeah, you know, the jurisdictions, the boundaries in Washington County, it just, I know I say the word coordination a lot, and I've said it about 200 times, I think, in this presentation, but we do so much coordination with our city partners because of that. It's all really complicated. So then actually a really good segue into this next is that the county has not had a traditional capital improvement plan. And I will tell you all, this is something that surprised me when I came to work for the county. I actually spent some time looking for our capital improvement plan because most jurisdictions have them. And then I learned that for the county, MISTIP was essentially our capital improvement plan, and then ERMD and some of the other funding programs that we have. And so the county administrator who came on board in 2020 is guiding the process of really developing a countywide capital improvement plan. And this is more than just transportation. This also includes counties' facilities and other areas where we invest capital or dollars. So there will be a transportation element of that capital improvement plan. Capital improvement plans for transportation are usually really closely related to transportation system plans and are often adopted at the same time. And so that's why transportation planning is pretty involved in this. So we'll be supporting the development and refinement of that capital improvement plan. It's projects identified in our transportation system plan. It's projects that we've talked about funding with the MISTIP program with some of our other identified funding programs. But this will involve some evaluation and more community engagement before we're done with it. It is a big effort for the county, and I'm very excited about it. So we have some more transportation projects on this slide. We are doing a concept plan right now for Farmington Road. There's a segment between 198th and Kinnaman that is under ODOT jurisdiction. And so we are going to be doing a concept plan for what the road could look like, some cost estimates for getting it up to what we'd call a state of good repair, and then a framework for how we would transfer jurisdiction from ODOT to the county of that segment of road. And so this is going to be a big undertaking. We have received a grant to fund this work, and it's underway now. We've also received a grant to update our transportation safety action plan, and this will be done in partnership with our traffic and operations staff. Doing this update now with this grant funding will make us eligible for federal transportation safety dollars. And so this is a really great opportunity for the county to possibly receive federal funds for projects. Something like Farmington Road may actually be a really good candidate for some federal safety dollars. So this is some work we'll be doing over the next approximately year to get that put together. And then we will likely have to do, before we can do the big update, we'll probably have some minor transportation system plan updates. We have Ordinance 882, which concerns the potential extension of Tile Flat Road, primarily in the area that was just brought into the urban growth boundary for the city of Tigard, and then a small part which is still in the rural undesignated area. So that work is underway. We also have a couple of other minor cleanups in the transportation system plan that we know that we have to do. So there will probably be a TSP ordinance that's relatively minor in addition to Ordinance 882, which is still happening. That goes to the board next in October. So another project we have with transportation planning is our countywide transit planning study. So we have the countywide transit study in partnership with TriMet, Metro, ODOT, and some of the cities of Washington County. That's underway right now. We also have the transit development plan. This is required as a part of administering statewide transit improvement funds. These funds are intended to bridge the gap in the rural area where there's not TriMet or Smart Service in Washington County. So we administer that funds. Generally, we pass it through to Ride Connection to provide that shuttle service. But there's some other funding, interesting funding pieces there. So we do a transit development plan every 2 years. We're required to do that again in 2024. And then trails planning. We will be continuing our active participation in planning for a number of regional trails. Transportation planning is right now leading the planning and initial design efforts for the Council Creek Regional Trail, which will connect Hillsborough, Cornelius, and Forest Grove. We have federal money to construct that trail. We expect it to open in 2029. And then we have some other trails planning efforts happening. So then the last theme is our plan and development code updates. So we have a number of things we need to do to keep our code documents clean and organized, and some of these are things we're required to do. So as I just mentioned, Tigard had an approved urban growth boundary request, so we'll need to apply FD20 to that area. North Plains is likely to propose an urban growth boundary expansion. I think they've already started their hearings for that, so we'll be required to update our comprehensive plans to reflect that as well. We also need to update the urban planning area agreement with the city of North Plains. Go ahead, Mary.
So North Plains is not part of the Metro UGB.
Right, it's outside of Metro.
So is there ever a conversation about North Plains is so close to being part of Hillsborough that maybe it should be part of the metro area?
I don't think that's something North Plains leadership is very interested in right now, but I would let you have that conversation with them.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'm not sure. So there are federal rules for how MPOs are formed and how big they are. And so I don't know if that's something that would ever necessarily come into play. So it'll be interesting. But they have their own rules for expanding their urban growth boundary. It's actually, I mean, the Metro process is quite the process, and cities outside of Metro have their own process. So that's been interesting for us since we haven't had an outside of Metro UGB expansion in a while to learn a little bit more about. So the next point on this slide, minor comprehensive plan updates. We are in the middle of a legislative session. I guess we don't know. Maybe it's kind of over right now. I guess we'll find out. But some legislation did pass before the Senate lost the quorum. And so we will have some legislation that we need to implement. There was some legislation from the last session that we need to implement. Sometimes these are relatively minor, and so it's not a major policy issue or a policy change. Also, sometimes these are just small issues or errors or inconsistencies that have been requested by staff, other agencies, or the public. And so that's why we rolled these into the minor comprehensive plan amendment umbrella. These, like I said, are generally really limited in policy implications. If they need to be more of a large discussion or more research put behind them, then they're generally a standalone project on their own. And then a couple other issue papers that we need to do some research in order to prepare would be some research around contractors' establishments. Contractors' establishments are fairly common use in areas that are transitioning to become more of an industrial or employment area. And so it can be a conflicting use with existing residential areas as well. And so this is something we'd like to do a little research on and some research on our regulations. We also have a proposed issue paper on systems development charge that the county assesses within THPRD's ultimate boundary. So this is a issue and coordination that we need to work on with THPRD on that particular SDC and how they want us to approach it in the future. Go ahead, Mary.
So Bruce and I were quite involved with that interim park system development charge. And I'm wondering if we will be possibly included in the conversation.
Let me note that down. I wasn't aware of that history.
Yeah, we were the
Instigators.
Instigators of it, because when annexation to the park district, Trentine Hills Park District, started implementing a fee, and it was optional, developers started opting out of joining the park district. And if you look at THPRD's northern boundary of its map, it looks like it has measles. Mm-hmm. And we got Jim Kimball and Mary and I were successful in convincing the county to assess it in the ultimate service district. And once that happened, then developers paid the fee and joined the district.
Mm-hmm.
So it was, it's a good thing. I don't know how much money it's generated over the years.
Oh, well, it's definitely generated money for the park district with the
Oh, yeah,
required annexation.
I don't
And
know.
what you're seeing, what the county is still collecting is for parcels, existing parcels that had already been approved as a parcel. And if they are to build at this point, they aren't required to annex to the district, but they are required to pay the system development charge to the county.
Correct. Yeah, so I just not noted this down. So I think that this issue paper, it may be towards the end of the work program timeframe by the time we get to this one. And so it's not going to be the highest priority of things to even within the priority items, but it is on the list. And so I will note
Bruce
that
and I
when
aren't
we do that.
Bruce and I aren't going anywhere, so
Okay.
we'll still be around.
And I have written that down. So that'll be great. Thank you. And I think one of the main issues with it, just since you were involved and you would understand this, the rate hasn't gone up, even though all the other SDCs have gone up pretty substantially since it was first implemented. And so it's really not keeping up with THPRD's other SDCs. And so that's something that we want to take a look at as well.
Perfect.
Okay, so requests received, and we're almost at the end of the PowerPoint too. So we receive a number of requests throughout the year on things people would like us to work on. And so this slide is a summary of what we have received. And so I don't want to necessarily talk through each of these on the slide, but I want to call out some of them because I know they'll be of interest to you. And if there's something else, please let me know. So gas station siting requirements received a tremendous amount of public interest, and we heard that clearly from the community. At this time, we're not recommending going forward with an ordinance from this work. The reason being, this is a really unusual type of land use. We'd only seen one application within the last 10 years. And then again, given staff limitations and being able to put forward an ordinance like this, and the fact that jurisdictions within Washington County and actually within the state of Oregon don't have similar restrictions to this, had us put it in the list of work program requests received, but not being recommended to move forward into tier 1. And so we know some people are unhappy with that and would have liked to really see that one move forward. But unfortunately, it's just not something we'll be able to take on in this time frame unless something else comes off the priority list. The other one is rural accessory dwelling units. We talked about the rural housing issue paper. We will still be doing that issue paper, and that research can be a part of it, but we're not planning to file an ordinance allowing them within this time frame. Significant natural resources, expanded SNR protections, including urban tree code. I know that's something CCI has been interested in. Generally, the board has felt this is more of a city level responsibility than a county responsibility. And so it's not something that they've authorized us to work on previously. And then you'll see the annual CCI letter points here, updating the neighborhood meeting rules, implementing 1% for the arts program on this list as well. And then, yeah, I think those are the ones that I wanted to call out. So I'll pause here though. Any other questions on these? Bruce, go ahead.
The annual CCI letter, is that to the CCI or from the CCI?
From the CCI, and I think this means maybe last year's or the one that we received in the fall.
Okay.
Mhm.
I should be familiar with that, I guess.
Gretchen, go ahead.
This is, again, I am requesting a special request. I would like to talk to you offline, and I can't get to the website to get your email address. If I give you mine, could you possibly email me so we can talk on the phone?
Oh, absolutely. And I probably have your email somewhere as well, but let me know what it is and I will write it down.
It's G, and my last name is B-U-E-H as in Henry, N as in Nancy, E-R, law, L-A-W, at Yahoo.
Okay.
Yeah, it's getting harder and harder for me to do stuff.
I'm always happy to talk on the phone as well. So I will reach out and send you my phone number and you can give me a
Thank you.
call. Yep, no problem. Go ahead, Jim. You're muted.
Aaron, could you elaborate a little bit more? You had talked about the Board of Commissioners not authorizing work on a tree code. Could you explain that? Did they expect cities to do it? We're really interested in getting some sort of tree protections happening in Washington County, in unincorporated Washington County. Could you explain the position the county is taking on this and what we can do in the future to make something happen?
So staff are authorized to do work that's in the work program. So if it does not emerge as a tier 1 task in the work program or a tier 2 task, then staff are not authorized to do that work. And so the tree code has been asked for in previous cycles, and the board has always declined to put it on the priority list. Part of that justification I've heard has been that it is something that they think cities do, not the county. And it is certainly something that you can suggest again be taken up by the board and that you can ask them to take a closer look at. I think that they may have the same answer, but I don't know that for sure. And it's up to the board to authorize the work.
Have any cities got tree codes?
Within Washington County, yes. And actually around the state of Oregon, a number of cities do.
Do any counties have tree codes?
I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head. Fran is nodding her head, and Fran knows a lot of things about this. And so she probably knows. Go ahead, Fran. Do you want to share more? Oh, I think you might be muted still, or did we just lose Fran?
I'm getting there.
No.
And I'll lower my hand to mute this. So I will produce a list of the counties and the cities that have tree codes in the state. Just for the record, because this is being recorded, the CCI and a group of CPOs have gotten together since 2009 and produced multiple documents, recommendations, et cetera. This is not a ding on Aaron. This is the Board of Commissioners have consistently kiboshed the idea. What's really serious at this point is like Cooper Mountain, where the city of Beaverton has written multiple letters to the Washington County because Cooper Mountain is unincorporated Washington County. And so now the clear cut has already begun and thousands of trees are getting subject to clear cut before the Beaverton tree code goes into effect. It's a major issue for Cooper Mountain, and we'll probably see a similar type of thing in places like Bonnie Slope. So we will continue to put the pedal to the metal and consistently pressure the commissioners that this is not a good decision at this point in time, especially with climate change. But anyway, I just thought I'd put that in for the record. It's been since 2009.
Thanks for that additional context, Fran. I appreciate that. Go ahead, Gretchen.
Additional context, when I was on the Tiger Council, we specifically updated our tree code, but we included developmental pluses for developers who would save tree copes, groups of trees that were important. And it was just getting started when I went off the council at the end of 2014. But that might be useful for you to just take a look at that part of the code because it's relevant to the areas, and it's Jim obviously in 4M where he's unincorporated, and it's a big issue on Bull Mountain and in the areas that King City is now bringing in. So I just passed that on.
Thanks, Gretchen. Go ahead, Bruce.
I forgot what I was going to say. I'll come back.
Okay, when you remember.
Um,
So this is actually, I think, our last slide. So the next steps. So the board directed distribution of the work program for a 6-week public review period when we shared it with them last month. And so we're in that review period right now, which is why I'm taking down our conversation tonight. We'll be sharing those. We have our online open house underway right now. We are still accepting input through other avenues as well. So you're welcome to send a letter, send an email, communicate with county staff in other ways. Our public comment period will last through the end of this month. And then the board will consider the work program adoption on July 18th. And I think the last slide is just all of our contact information. So I'm at the top here, and then we have our 3 principal planners for our 3 different planning groups listed on here as well. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing because I know you all have more questions. Go ahead, Bruce. Did you remember?
Yeah, I did. The statement that tree code, for example, is something that cities do, but the county doesn't, is a little disingenuous for a county that has created 220 some odd thousand people in the urban unincorporated area, which looks like a city and should function like a city, but is operating under county rules. So we are going to be making the case that the urban unincorporated area puts the county in the rather uncomfortable position of having to provide some city level services to its residents to help them aspire to their quality of life. So that was my little spiel.
It's always the tension of Washington County is having this large urban unincorporated area that, like you said, it's kind of like a city, but not quite. And so it's just always the struggle with serving that with county level funding and services.
Lars.
Thank you, Bruce. You're absolutely correct. It's quite a large area outside, and CPO 10 is one of those areas where a lot of property owners with some fairly large acreages of different kinds, and to be told what to do with your land is sort of out of line, and that it's very different from an urban or in a city lot type of a thing where you have whole different issues. So I think that's something the county needs to be sure or consider anyway, not to make rules. It's easy to make rules and kind of hard to enforce. Another issue, Aaron, while I have the hand up, is Farmington Road is one of these roads that has a city, it has a state, it has a county, and so forth. It's a very complicated road issue, and me and many of my constituents in CPO 10 use Farmington Road. It's our main artery to get into the city. And also it is the main source of rock, meaning building material for roads, building, and so forth, of Knife River Quarry, also used to be known as, Cooper Mountain. Well, many different names over the years. But it involves truck traffic, and we're not talking little trucks. We're talking big ones, heavy loads. And if you ever drive around and see that, you understand the problem. And I think that I would ask you in your next meetings to consider resolving that issue. I have brought it up for years as a CPO leader in years past, and I've been on ROMAC for many years, and it still remains the same. It's sort of stuck at 170th, and if you go west from that, you have some really long lines, and when you add school buses to it and so forth, it will be a very tedious trip. And that's it for me.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thanks, Aaron. Appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Fran.
I have the feeling I'm going to jump the gun here on you, Bruce, but having worked with Aaron for so many years on many different projects, thank you very much for this presentation. I'm glad that you didn't just read the slides, you actually obviously put some study time in advance, and we appreciate your openness to our questions, etc. So thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Well done as always.
Thank you for a superb presentation. Well delivered, well spoken, very informational, and very accommodating to our myriad questions. Thank you so much.
I am always happy to be talking to people about the work we do. I think it's really interesting. I know that there's a lot more we could be doing, but I think that we're able to do some pretty interesting stuff still.
All right.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. And enjoy the rest of your evening, please.
Thanks.
Okay, now for business. Virginia is she still online? Yes. So I actually was able to, Mary, what do you got?
So do we have any comments that we want to make on the work program that would be written?
Jim, what do you got?
I think that the CCI steering committee should submit some comments to the county before the end of the month with some of our concerns.
Somebody floated something that they were very disappointed with that wasn't in the work program, but I can't remember what it was.
I am going to be unable to lead that effort, just on a practical level. I think it's a good idea.
I would,
Fran, are you
I will
volunteering?
work, I would work on it. And also the new formatting is another one of the, it's like you take a survey, but you don't really know what the plan is and things like that necessarily. So I definitely want to work on a CCI joint session. We used to have those intermediate, remember, Mary, we would always have a comment from the different groups and then pull them all together as a single letter.
Yeah,
So if anybody else wants to work on it, I can facilitate getting a meeting together.
Jim, you're in.
Yep. Now is the time to make the comments.
Mary?
I think this is a really good example of why having a code and ordinance subcommittee has some real value. But I just don't have
Yeah.
the bandwidth at this point, so.
Yeah. If we could get some reckless person with a lot of knowledge and wisdom to lead it,
Who
reckless,
would that be?
who would that be? Gretchen, what do you got?
You're on mute.
I'm trying to unmute myself. I'm unmuted now.
Yeah.
Damnation.
Oh,
Okay,
you're muted.
okay. It's for some reason, it's way down and I can barely reach. I don't know why. Anyway, following up on Mary's comment, I think maybe our short-term job for the code committee would be to maybe following up specifically on what the work plan is going to be around code, the audit, etc., over the next couple of years. Maybe that would be a better use of our limitless amount of energy. Just a thought.
Okay, Fran is going to be putting together a meeting to write a letter. Okay, boys and girls, we have finally, Mary?
So the question is Fran is heading a committee to put together a letter, but the letter still needs to go through steering committee before it's sent.
Yeah.
And the steering committee meets tomorrow.
Well, no,
Yeah.
you can submit the letter and we can review it and approve it via email.
Yeah.
Because there's no way you can get it ready by tomorrow.
Well, 5 o'clock tomorrow, that's a lot of time. Okay, let's move on. I finally was able to get unimpeded communication with Ellen Partle. She is still in Florida. And since we now have a candidate for vice chair and communication subcommittee, she respectfully bowed out. She thanked us for a great learning experience and wished us well in the future of the CPO and CCI program. So Ellen has made contact, and now we have elections. Mary Manso has very generously offered to be vice chair of the CCI, and Virginia is willing to do a bang-up job as the communication subcommittees are. So bang up. So anybody have any discussion? I'm looking for a motion to put those two names on the ballot.
I'll
And
second
Okay. So who made the motion?
Lars Wallstrom.
Oh, okay. You made it, and is somebody who seconded it?
Gretchen's waving her hands.
I
Okay.
made the motion.
Okay, and Lars seconded it. Okay. Any more discussion? All right. So using the perverse negative voting rules that I unilaterally constructed, is anybody opposed to this? Then therefore 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 people voted for it to 0. So we now have vice chair and a communication subcommittee.
Thank you, officers.
Yes, thank you. Fran wanted a couple minutes, no more than 3, to query about the CPO receptiveness to the rabble rousing that she's been doing.
Very quickly, I would like to have a yes or no to those CPOs to whom I made a presentation about what I call helpful information, information about the land use process, and about tree keepers, that combination. Did people who had it, like CPO 10, CPO 6, CPO 1, was that useful enough so that I should ask other CPOs if they would like a similar presentation? I just need a yes or no.
Lars, did you see the presentation?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, you were there when if you recall, but I think Lars, maybe you came in late for that meeting. So just a real quick thumbnail sketch. It's identifying who the legislators are for that particular CPO area, because some of them change by the district, who their commissioners are, et cetera. And then the whole land use process and how to do conservancy and stewardship and things like that. And then where all the websites are that they can look at, et cetera. So it's a sheet and then it's a presentation. So if you want to, you can just contact me, or you can raise your hand and say if your CPO would like me to make a presentation. And it can be either virtual or in person. Maybe it's best to just email me. Gretchen?
Call me.
Okay, so just email me and I'll send you a packet. Maybe I should send around the packet. Bruce,
Yeah, send the packet to
for
everyone.
a sample, but people can see what I'm talking about.
Send it to
Okay.
Christina for inclusion with the minutes.
Okay,
Thank
just
you.
a contribution for people about land use.
What a wonderfully inspired notion that is. Thank you. Okay. Along that line, Fran constructed a Google Doc website, and there are quite a few different documents on it. And I've spent a little bit of time going through it. It needs a little bit of structure to make it a little bit more useful, but it's there, which is the big part. Has anybody looked through it to have any feeling for what's there and how we might arrange it in a little hierarchical structure? Okay, I'm overwhelmed with the response here. So
vague memories of that some long time ago.
okay, I'm going to put it into the minutes so that we can take a look at it, and I would be happy to work with people to give it some structure. There's a little bit of structure, but
it's sort of like the archives documents that are useful for studying different things.
My thought, Mary, what do you got?
I mean, all of our hard drives are probably cluttered up with these things, and if we just had them up in the cloud, it would be good for everyone.
I think all of our hard drives are cluttered.
Having access to it would be very beneficial, and I'm wondering, is that something that could actually be added to our agenda so we have access to it on a regular basis and don't have to go hunting for it?
Yeah. Yeah. We'll talk about that in the steering committee tomorrow.
Yeah, what I'd like to do is have somebody look at it and give me feedback about how you want to arrange it, and then I could do a presentation, kind of a navigation walkthrough.
Oh.
And then people could say, yeah, we want those kind of documents, or no, we don't want those documents to be handy for folks.
Yeah. Okay, very good. That's good news. One little note, I believe it was Megan Jerry Willie's
McKibben.
Jerry Willie's executive assistant said that CPL 12F had received a list of agenda topics from Commissioner Willie, and Darcy and I had a little dialogue this afternoon, and she said that CPL 12F has not received a set of agenda topics suggested by Commissioner Willie. So,
Oh, yeah.
so I think that this is a subject of general interest for all of the commissioners to suggest things to the CPOs within their districts. And Commissioner Fye is doing a bang up job in running training sessions. And I don't know if you call it exactly a town hall, but she is doing the best outreach of any of the commissioners right now. And I would like to know what she thinks subjects for CPOs to look at are. So that's something else for the steering committee to bring up tomorrow. Okay. I think I can read that note. So let's go through the subcommittee reports, starting off with the significant natural resources.
Oh, okay.
Oh, was that too quick?
Yeah, you're getting pretty quick there. Okay, we met last week, and the most fun part of the agenda, we do first thing, which is to talk about the wildlife we've seen. And we've seen great blue herons, skunks. There was one picture with 7 skunks and raccoons. Not as many birds as usual. A hummer, mallards snoozing, stellar jays, some great big white oaks like I have behind me here, flickers, deer, goldfinch, owls, woodpeckers, and robin's nests, among other things. But we also, we talked about the enforcement order, which, as you know, last month we were 2 days before the LCDC hearing, and I sent out the link to all of you. How many of you could just raise your hand, how many of you actually saw the LCDC hearing? Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. So the Land Conservation Development Commission approved doing the enforcement order. They concluded that the county was once again out of compliance with Goal 5 to protect natural resources and many other things. And as the petitioner, Jill Warren, pointed out at the contested case hearing, without an enforcement order in place, the county would be required to process an application, even if the applicant refused to be bound by the non-clear and objective approval criteria. So if the county denied the application, the applicant appealed to LUBA, LUBA would be forced to follow the law and overturn the denial because the non-clear and objective approval criteria would be unenforceable as a matter of law and therefore could not provide the basis for denial. So I know that's a lot of legal stuff, but there's many things. It's a 16-page document in the enforcement order, and I guess maybe that's something we should send out to you now that the enforcement order has come out, so that you can take a look at it and get further information about what's happening. Obviously, we're concerned about the tree codes, and Fran, with the tree keepers, she talked about they're doing a Cool Schools program where they're providing natural solutions for climate defense and protecting trees and different species. So Fran, if you want to talk about your Cool Schools program, that would be a nice segue.
Actually, real quickly, we're just on the breach of it. We're applying for a federal grant, and it's with a whole bunch of other collaboration with a whole bunch of other agencies. It's going to pull all this stuff together. But basically for the Title I schools and the schools that don't have enough tree cover for shade, we're going to look, the idea is to pull up the asphalt, put in gardens or food, farming kinds of things where the kids can actually learn about what we have here in the county. And get rid of so much of this heat generating asphalt where it makes sense. And the huge federal grant available under the IRA and the US Forest Service. And I have lots of inroads there. So
would replacing
keep in
it
touch.
with wood, taking up asphalt and putting wood chips down, would that?
It's one of the options. A lot of there's a nationwide endeavor. I don't want to take everybody's time, but there's a nationwide endeavor to green a lot of the schools. And it's actually cheaper to maintain a garden and trees than it is to maintain the asphalt. And meanwhile, the kids can learn in their area what's appropriate for their neighborhoods and all that kind of stuff. And meantime, enjoy the shade and the heat. So we'll, just stay tuned. I have a major meeting with the Oregon Department of Forestry and lots of other feds.
Thank you.
Moving along pretty quickly. The date are due. The first grant application due date is May 30th. So I'm busy with that.
Okay, and back to the Significant Natural Resources Committee. One thing that Fran had, she had a video of the King City plan for Fishers Road. There's an unincorporated area there where there's the talk of a town center, a big town center. And it's right adjacent to the Tualatin River. There's a wonderful video shot with a drone that shows all the trees and the significant resource areas there. So we talked about doing an inventory of critters, and we're going to put together a list of species of wildlife that are in Washington County. We started that 7 or 8 years ago in the Cedar Crest area, 82nd and Cedar Crest. We came up with a list of 66 species, but we're going to try and expand that. We also are believing that this diversity, equity, inclusion includes wildlife. They've been here before we were. So we talked about a number of other things, but I'm going to leave it. We're going to look at mitigation efforts more closely. Clean Water Services has commented that it's just not everything that it's said to be, and we want to get more information for you and get it in front of you. But about mitigation, there's no follow-up in mitigation areas, only 1 or 2 year monitoring by the county. So I think this is an issue that we might want to consider with these new significant natural resource clear and objective standards, so that we can make sure that when mitigation happens, that it's going to be evaluated and it's going to continue, instead of other people coming along a couple of years later making a decision, oh, let's take out those trees, let's do this, so let's do that. Anyway, those are some of our thoughts. We're going to look at what is the mitigation bank and get more information from the county, what they have. Tree Keepers has access to Tree Plotter, which can do tree loss down to tax lot level. So we're getting more information. Fran is the guru on a lot of this. She has connections with a lot of people with her different groups. But we are going to try and look at what's clear and objective, and trying to find out what other cities are doing. We may be a county organization, but the cities are in the county. We should find out and get some interaction with the cities. I see a couple of hands up for Paul and Virginia.
I just wanted to mention that CPO1, the focus of our June meeting is going to be the stay and what it means. And we're in the midst of inviting people. Jill has agreed to give us a short history of how the whole effort came about. And Jim, you agreed to join us. And Fran is going to invite people from the county, and she's also suggested inviting the land use lawyer, and I think that's great. And so if anybody else has ideas, and of course you're all invited, we're doing hybrid meetings now with actual in-person location and Zoom, and it's working really well.
And what date is that, Virginia?
That is
June
13th.
Thank you. Paul?
From 7 to 9, and I'll be happy to send the invitation to all of the CCI members. And feel free to invite your CPO members as well. The more the merrier.
Thank you, Paul.
What's on my mind, you've been talking about trees, urban versus rural. And the one context that is not really being addressed is, if you're going to do something in the rural area, I'm thinking about safety issues, preventing fire, that kind of thing. So if there's going to be any kind of a standard in the rural area, it's got to take into consideration, how do we make areas safe that are strictly rural without some sort of onerous code?
Right, at this time, I think the county's looking just within the UGB
Mhm.
for its policies, and we've heard tonight that they don't have anything. Fran said there's thousands of trees that are at risk on Cooper Mountain, so I don't say we're too late, but we have to keep pushing forward to try and get something. And that might be part of the letter that comes out of this group regarding the work plan that Aaron presented to us tonight. So that's it for the S&R committee report. Any more comments?
Thank you. For next month,
Thank you, Jim.
that you could get a sort of a summary written up in advance to submit. Think about it. Think about it.
Summary beforehand to do
Yeah.
it?
Yeah. Or afterwards, I guess. But something that would make it easier to track the details is the thinking. Okay, so that brings us to the re-envisioning subcommittee, the CPR subcommittee. We met after the May 11th OEICE presentation to the Board of Commissioners, in which the Board of Commissioners did not want to hear about the kind of low-level tactics that were being proposed. They wanted to know, why are we doing this? What's the goal? What's the strategy that is of the re-envisioning, and what's the strategy of OEICE? So that changed the nature of the presentation, and I expect we'll be hearing from OEICE about their thinking. In advance of that, Mary and Gretchen and I met a couple days later, and Darcy, and I know you want to be part of that, and Jim. And I sent out 2 documents, and I want to sort of briefly run through the thinking of those documents. I had prepared one as input when the strategic plan was going to be a gating item for the CPO re-envisioning project. It is not. And the strategic plan is decoupled from the CPO re-envisioning project, which I think makes sense, since there isn't a lot in the strategic plan except for one big thing, which is the urban unincorporated area. And in line with the comments that I made to Aaron, the county, I'm surprised that Chair Harrington still was going, the county doesn't do community building, because the county inherited over 200,000 people living in an urban area that need to have resilient coherence facilitated in their communities. And the only one to do that is the county. And the county doesn't have to actually do anything. It can use other groups to do part of that work. But the first document that I sent out, entitled Community Support in the UUA, is really a commentary on what I'm suggesting we need to see added, or I should say the CPR subcommittee is suggesting we should see added in the strategic plan, as an acknowledgement that we didn't make the UUA, but we own the UUA. And so let's do the right thing with it. And so when you read that document, that is in the encouragement that I would like to give the board is like, you know, it's the county's moral responsibility to treat the UUA like a group of urbanized citizens that it is. And the second document is a CCI summary of resolution and order 8108, which Mary did the first draft of, and I added a little bit to it. Resolution 8108, when you go back and read it, is quite visionary when you consider it was done before the urban growth boundary came along. And in there, there's a lot of really good stuff that includes a lot of things that we actually are doing still. So we created an executive summary that would be more easily digestible, since I'm not really sure how well long documents are digested by our elected officials unless we really give them a test afterwards to see what did you learn from this document. So in creating an executive summary, we can ensure that the main points, the high level points are there. And then, Mary, I added a few little illuminating notes out of 108 that sort of, in my opinion, rounded out. And I entitled the document the roots of the CPO program and looking into the future, or something like that. So, Mary, what do you got?
Yeah, you took my one-page document and turned it into two. Yes,
I
you did
did.
add a little.
I did. Well,
And I really encourage everybody to take a look at that and to give us feedback, because I feel like it really captures what the program does, what it was doing back in 1980, and we still continue to do. And it's really, it just really encapsulates what we see the program serving. So I encourage everybody to take a look at it and to give us feedback. So we get additional voices added to our thinking.
yeah, and I will put that on in the Google Share Drive. And this is an effort to get even to participate with OAICE in specifying what we think a community participation group in an unincorporated area, urban area, should be doing. So, Virginia.
You're on mute.
Mary and I have had some conversations lately about whether we want to let OEICE define us, or if we need to define ourselves and maybe make a counter proposal to the board about the future of the CCI and the CPO system, because all of our dithering, a good deal of it has been, if not a lack, at least not a focus on defining ourselves. And the RNO is a good starting point. If we can all be on one, I was suggesting a facilitated retreat with, exercises to help us all be on the same page. But maybe this document does the job. I have got to confess, I haven't read it.
Well, I just sent it out.
Some weird health issues myself. So
I just sent it out tonight. So
the other side of that is looking at creating a counter proposal to the board for having OEI. I mean, I'm beginning to agree with Mary, who's been saying all along that they don't get it. And their presentation to the board made it obvious that they don't get it.
Well, they have their focus, but their focus is not in creating a community participation group.
Yeah, and community engagement is like way down on their list of priorities.
Well, it's way up on our list. Gretchen, what do you got?
I made a point after our meeting of reading that in depth, and not only was it, I had totally forgotten about this stuff, from way back when we were a lot younger, but it seems to me it gives the board a defensive position to start with, in that this was already adopted, XYZ years ago.
Yeah.
And one of the political issues is, if they've got something that isn't broken, CCA, anyway, they shouldn't be trying to break it.
Well, it's not broken, but it certainly isn't as robust as we would all like it to be.
Yeah.
Mary, what do you got?
I think it was really valuable to me listening to the work session, and I encourage people to take the time to go back and listen to that, because it really was a very useful way to spend my time. And I think one of the things that came out of that was Catherine said any number of times, we need to know what the role is of the CPO program, which is one of the reasons I went back to that resolution in order, because it just specifically spells out, the role, the purpose, and it, one of the things OEICE was saying was that goal 1 does not require the CPO program. It requires the CCI program, but that resolution in order very specifically says the CPO program is the county's way of implementing the requirements of goal 1. I mean, it's spelled out black and white. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
And the CCI is a subordinate group to the CPO program.
And the OEICA rolled in there, and so the board was all just going to vote and say, yeah, go for it. And Catherine just said, whoa. It was quite a surprise to me.
Gretchen, you're waving your hand.
Nope, I
Okay.
said my piece.
Okay, very good. So we got 10 minutes left.
Oh, I do have my report.
And then we have Gretchen's legislative report.
Okay,
Mary, is your hand still up?
no, sorry.
That's great.
okay.
Oh, Jim, just a second. Jim has something.
Yeah, I'd like to voice that I'm in agreement with some of Virginia's proposals to do, to counter the OIECE position on what they're proposing. I think that if we did it, we'd use more robust words. We'd use things that worked a little bit better. I think there's something there. I don't necessarily want to start doing it right now, but I think it would be a smart thing for us to do. We know what we want to convey, and we don't think that the Community Engagement Office necessarily has our same interest in mind as they do their work. So I would think that it would be valuable for us to communicate our thoughts on this.
Thank you. Mary.
Mary?
Mary's mute.
I think it's really important to look at the 2-page summary that Bruce put together from Resolution Order 8108, because I think we don't really need to counter OEICE because it's already in writing. It's already been adopted.
Uh,
And
Well,
it's,
but they're
it's the starting point.
But
It's the
group,
starting point.
it is a great starting point. And group, I would say that since OEICE has not really put a plan on it, there's nothing to counter. And using the term counter creates an adversarial stance that we may use to our advantage later, but I don't think it serves us very well now. And if we simply say, hey, we've done the work, we've done the the research, we've studied it, here is what we suggest, then we become the thing that is talked about. Who else is? Okay.
Are you ready?
Yes, Gretchen.
Okay. I'll keep it short and simple. We have a big problem in the Senate. The Republicans have, as you've probably seen, their stated reason is readability of bills. I mean, they've been approving bills right and left with same issues. What the primary reason is, one, they're against the bill, and I can't remember the bill number, that relates to trans medication, and they're particularly concerned of minor trans women being able to get the blockers, puberty blockers. That's one. Secondly, the abortion rights legislation, better access, but the biggest part is 2022, which would allow minors to get abortions without parental consent. And third, the gun measure, which would kind of clean up what was missing in the bill that was passed in legislature. That being said, all the bills passed by the House are stuck. The good news, 3114, which was the bill that I referenced last month regarding changing the burden of proof on variances, which would be a nightmare. It's finally gone. It's not going to pass. The downside is the bill that carried the broadband for rural areas is stuck in Senate. We only have 5 more weeks in the allowed term of the legislative session, so the Senate could continue to not be able to do anything the rest of session. Okay, I have something positive, Jim. I was standing in my front yard talking to my neighbor, and here comes Mother Mallard Duck out and through the front yard. Now we're in small lots, across the street from us with 12 babies, ducklings following along, and they went along all the, whole blocks worth of houses and then meandered on down. There's another pond in behind, but I had never seen mother and children in front of our very urbanized houses. So, thank you.
That's great.
Okay. Okay, moving along. Feedback to the CPR subcommittee on those documents. In a couple of weeks, I don't have, there's no hard and fast timeline. We kind of discuss it. Mary and I discuss it like almost every other day in some capacity or another. So I am committed to creating a program which creates community resilience on multiple levels. And so there we go. That's my goal. The CCI steering committee is meeting tomorrow at 5 p.m. over Zoom. The link is in the chat. I've lost track of who the heck is on the steering committee. So Paul and Mary and Jim and Gretchen are on the steering committee. Did I catch everybody? Who else is there?
I think it seems small because Ellen is no longer on steering committee.
And Greg dropped off. Fran, what do you got?
If you want another member, I can join. Not necessarily in person all the time, but I'm always a interested party in participating, commenting.
Well,
so
we've only
if you
ever
don't, that's fine. I'm not.
I will send you the link and you can decide. We've only ever met virtually. Okay.
So you're going to send the link out to us all?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, Bruce, I can't take it out of the chat. So if you can send
I
it
will.
to me.
I'm going to
Thank
email
you.
it to you. That's why I needed to find out who is on the steering committee.
Okay. And make sure it's got the blue link.
Yes, ma'am. Okay. So we got a couple minutes. Is there a CPO update that somebody is burning to get off their chest? Yeah, Gretchen.
CPO 4B met last night, had a rip-roaring discussion regarding the plan, which is coming to council, the master plan for the new area next week. And per Mike, it went till almost 11 o'clock. And normally we have a drop dead time of 8:30. Unfortunately, my husband got in a car wreck last night, late yesterday afternoon, and I was a little bit occupied, and so I was not able to go to the meeting in person. But it was, and we're talking about, also we have a lovely agenda for the June meeting. So we're up and running again.
Very good.
Everything's fine.
Mary, what do you got?
So CPO 7 just received an application for a project on a significant natural resource. And I don't know if it's anything Jim would be interested in. It's parkland that's being hopefully improved. So
THPRD.
yeah, it's the Bales Pond area. So Fran, I saw your hand waving. Is that something you're interested in taking a look at? Okay. You know, it may all be good and fine, but I think, you know, because of the stay, it's kind of an interesting development in that it's going to move forward and it's going to be hopefully enhancement as opposed to degradation. So
Very good. Look
Can I
forward-
just make a real quick comment?
Sure.
Remember, the stay is only for residential development. Does not affect
okay.
PHPRD,
Okay.
streets or,
Okay.
yeah, okay.
So interesting. But I'd be happy to have you take a look at it because I think you have, you know, good background.
Lars, what do you got?
We're one of the few CPOs with our own airport. It's called Twin Oaks Air Park. It's on River Road.
Yep.
And we're meeting there on Thursday night. And with that, I'd like to thank the work that was done by staff really to enable us to have our meetings in person, because many of us, because we're out in the hills, don't have access to internet. I do, but many others don't. So we really enjoy our meetings, and we've had many of them, and Fran has participated, and she is a wealth of knowledge on anything related to trees and heritage, and if you want to run your own. So anyway, you're all welcome Thursday night to Twin Oaks Air Park on River Road.
Can we have a ride in the plane?
What was that, Bruce?
Do you give rides in airplanes?
No, I don't think so. You're going to get a tour of the place and see the operations, and you can come in your own aircraft, and there's no TSA involved either. You can just let it going. Well, that's it.
I want to be frisked.
Well, that's it. My hearing is really not working well. I've been in 2 armies, and it's taken its toll in the old days.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Thank you.
Okay, kids, anything else for the good of the order? Seeing nothing, I'll
Thank you all for attending.
entertain a motion to leave.
Yes,
Right.
move.
Seconded, we're done. Class dismissed.
Bye, guys.
Oh my God, it's 9 o'clock. It's
Yeah,
9 o'clock.
I didn't catch the second on that.
I'll second it.
Thank you.
I'd just like to thank Bruce for leading a good meeting,
Yeah,
but he's
thank
gone.
you.
Bye.
Good
Good
job.
night.
See you next time.
Good night.
Good night. Take care.
Oh, how do I get out? Leave.